Okay.
And just like that, we're back. Here we are, ladies and gentlemen. The Good Life.
Are
we back?
Well, this is
a joke?
off the cuff. This is a special edition of our podcast that, man, we did we even, we took a break. We took a long break.
It's been almost a year.
And we're still on the break.
Mm-hmm.
But it goes without saying, we've missed this.
I have missed
okay?
this. You know what makes me really happy is I still get messages of people who are like, I still listen to the old episodes. I literally got one yesterday. It said, I listened to the old episodes of The Good Life. It still holds up. It still makes me feel good. And I was like, dude, that's awesome. Like, a year later, people are still listening. So
podcast is still alive.
She said, will the Good Life podcast ever come back? And I said, we'll see.
Listen, we're going to take it one step at a time as we have. But this feels really good. And I will say, this isn't like us rebooting the podcast right now. If you're here listening, we're so excited to be back on the mic. We had to dust these things off today as we were getting them out of our closet and setting up for this. But this is something that we have been wanting to share with you guys. And it was actually a reason why we needed to stop the podcast when we did almost a year ago. And we get to talk all about it today. Well, so this is exclusive. This is an exclusive podcast.
I'm just going to dive right in and say it. We could not have written this book if we were still doing the podcast. We had to, stopping the podcast was a huge part of starting this book. And so we knew that we couldn't take on all the things at once, growing our family, podcast, social media, book, et cetera, et cetera. But here we are a year later, and we've completed the task. We've written this book, which didn't take a year. It actually took like 4 years, and we can talk about that in a second. But that's a big reason why we stepped away from the podcast.
The secret is out. We wrote a book, and we've hinted it a few times. Instagram fam, if you are very close to us on the day-to-day, you've probably seen us drop a few hints here and there. Right. But to be completely honest with you guys, this book journey started back in 2018, and it has been a roller coaster of a ride. And we're going to get into all of that because we genuinely feel like the heartbeat of this book and the message behind this book is a message that we feel is so profound and so important to share with the world that we knew it wasn't going to be something that was just going to come to life and fruition overnight. And so now that it's here, now that it's packaged, now that we get to share it with the world, we are very excited to get you guys the details behind this book and the story and the journey of why we even wrote a book, right?
I think we need to go back first. We gotta hit the rewind button.
Hit that. Can you do that rewind sound effect, Stevie?
That's not, but I just want to do that. So we're going to go back in time, Saz. This whole thing started in 2018. People are probably like, what's wrong with you? Why does it take you 5 years to write this book?
Let's all think back to 2018. What were you doing back in 2018?
We were wiping Teeny's diapers.
Her fresh newborn butt.
Right. We were living in California, and we're now in Texas. I mean, we've been through a pandemic since then. So everything's changed.
Yeah. I'll never forget the day that I opened up my inbox and I saw an email with the subject line from a very big publishing company, HarperCollins. And I saw this email, and the email had said that they had been following me for a while, this specific person in that department, and that finally she felt like she wanted to reach out, and she needed to reach out after she saw my Makeup and Motivate series that I had on my channel. Now, if you know, this book doesn't have anything to do with makeup, and it doesn't have anything to do with my YouTube channel. But what I will say is that door, that Makeup and Motivate series, as I was in the thick of being in new mom life, that opened a door that I would have never in a million years would have imagined for my life as a content creator and a storyteller, to be able to have an opportunity from a huge publishing company to send me an email that said, we would love to work with you to write your own book. And as excited as I was, Stevie, I remember I showed you that email. We were both like, oh my gosh, is this like real? I remember feeling like, well, wait, where do you even start with this, right? I'm not an author. I'm not the best writer, to be honest with you. I thought.
You're a good writer.
Thank you. Well, through this process, I have learned how to actually write through the pages of a book versus a blog post. But it was just a new journey for me. And anytime you do something new, as you know, it's scary. So 2018, right? This book was going to launch 2019. And what happened, babe? So much life.
You hit the brakes.
So much.
You said, sorry, pull the curtain, close the show. We gotta, this is not right.
Well, I wish it was that easy for me to just be like, put the stake in the ground and say, I'm not doing this, but I was wrestling with it. Imagine when you feel like God is presenting you with an opportunity and you know that God has brought this opportunity because he is almost challenging you in a good way to pursue this path. I knew it was a God-filled path, and I did not want to disappoint. I didn't want to disappoint my followers who I was going to be writing this book for, and I also didn't want to put something out into the world that genuinely I felt was not going to be.
That didn't come from like your heart.
Didn't come from my heart, and that there wasn't a true message behind.
Right.
As we see, there's so many books out today, which are awesome. Some books are for fun. Some books are with purpose. And I knew that I wanted to be somewhere in the middle. I just wanted to be myself and create a book that I felt like could live on the shelves of people's lives and not collect dust, but to actually fuel them, give them encouragement, purpose, some laughter in between. And I just felt very overwhelmed by it all. And I finally decided, being in the phase of being a new mom and everything going on in our lives, we were getting ready to move out of LA. All these transitions were happening in our life. I just felt the conviction in my heart that I needed to be okay with putting a pause on this until I really figured out what it is that I wanted to do. Yeah. HarperCollins is an amazing publishing company. They have so many divisions, so many departments. And the department that I was working with at the time, I didn't know if that was like the type of book I wanted to do.
Right.
And so they were very helpful to try to help me navigate through the process. But something in me said, you're not ready yet. And I felt like a failure. I felt like, well, this opportunity is not going to come around every single day. Did I just lose this opportunity because I can't show up for it? But I had to trust my God-filled instincts and say, look, I've got to go be a mom. Yep. I've got to go focus on what's in front of me right now, which is an amazing family, the platforms that I've been blessed with. And I need to just keep going and showing up every day. And I'll figure out, I think, the purpose and the message behind the book. Because I didn't know at the time. And this was right around the time before we launched our podcast.
Right. Well, this whole thing has been a God-led process from the beginning. And I have to come out and say that because truly God has marked our whole career with his leadership. And you've always done a really good job of listening, you know, to where you feel like God is telling you to go next. And so even though you're presented with something that was like, oh my gosh, this is a dream opportunity to write a book, something's not right yet. I'm not ready yet. You know, my message isn't ready. What do I want to share with the world if I get one shot? That's the question we wanted to answer. And so I remember when we started the podcast, that was kind of the first setting sail of trying to figure out what that message is, because the podcast was a huge part of writing this book and a large part of why we're here right now. Because when we started the podcast, I remember we were going through names and we were like, should we name it Off the Grid? Like something like behind the scenes Instagram. I'm so glad we didn't do that.
Life off the grid.
Yeah, I'm so glad that we didn't do that. It was something that we were like, we want to put good out into the world and we want to talk about life. We're like, what if we name it The Good Life? And we didn't know much more than that.
And I said, but what if people are going to associate it with the Kanye West song, which
I was like,
is a great song, but
that's a great song.
I feel like everything that the song talks about what the good life is actually that's not what the real good life is. Right.
Hey, but that's a good song. Don't be hating on that song. But I remember when we started the podcast, that was kind of we were setting sail. We didn't know exactly where we were going. But along that journey, we learned so much, discovered so much about ourselves and the message that we wanted to put out there. And that was answering the question of what is a good life?
Right.
What is the good life?
And I felt like in that season, the challenge that for us was we were going from these content creators. We were very visual creators. Like it's all about creating the content from, you know, the photos, the beautiful shots and videos and transitions. It was very much a visual thing that we felt like we were capturing while we were in front of the camera and in the content. Right. We were focused on like capturing beauty. And I think what we were realizing is as we were in the thick of also being new parents, we saw how God was working and shaping in us what beauty looks like beyond just what the eye can see, but what you can say and what you can share and the voice that God gives you. There's so much beauty in our words and how we channel those words and how we share them with others. And I remember having a vision, specifically 2018, right before we launched this podcast as an outlet for us to be able to use these words and share our words. I remember I saw a vision and it was like a skyline view of Los Angeles. And I remember looking down and seeing like just a bunch of faces and people, some familiar, some unfamiliar, but it was a bunch of people of influence, I guess you can say. And everybody had tape over their mouths. And I remember specifically hearing the Father saying to me in this vision, I want you to remove the tape. And I felt like it was almost like he was speaking specifically to me, but over the entire generation. I think that we, during that time, were very much caught up in capturing the quote unquote perfection of life and what success meant and all of those things. And I got caught up in that for a while. So when I felt like God really cornered me there, and from a loving place, God the Father said to me, I want you to remove the tape. I don't know why, but that conviction, it hit me enough to where I woke up the next day and I was like, I think God wants me to start using my voice more. I think I need to start sharing more of the real stories and the real experiences that are happening in my life as a new mom, as a wife, as an entrepreneur. There were so many things like that. And I think that's where you and I sat together. And when I was thinking about, well, I should probably do something, and I was thinking of a series option for YouTube and all that, something struck me again that said, you and me, Stevie, are going to be better together. This, me using my voice, I knew I couldn't do it alone. There's something about doing it with you. There's the comfort. There's also just, I think, the power when we come together as one. Mm-hmm. I say, I'm the fire, you're the ice. There's just something that it complements. And I knew God was actually calling us both into that. So that's where the podcast came about.
I think there was just a real transition in our life for substance and for good. I remember at that time there was just so much negativity in the news, and I was getting caught up in it, and it was beginning to really impact me on a day-to-day, and my soul just felt depleted of life, of energy, and I was focusing so much on negative things, whether it was the shows I was watching. It's like my vision was blurred. I wasn't able to see the goodness that was all around me, that was clearly all around me. And that's what happens when you're depressed or anxious. You're not able to see clearly the good that God has placed all around you. And so I remember I just began hungering for good. There was this book that I read called 40 Days to a Joy-Filled Life. And the first chapter changed my life because it simply said, focus on the good, look for the good, Wow. And just that one thing alone started changing. I was like, I want to focus on the good. Not only do I want to focus on the good, but I want to be somebody who puts good out there, because more people are looking for good things. They need to hear good news. That's why we did our good news of the week. And sometimes it was funny. Sometimes it was just really heartfelt and good, but it was always good. It always led to good. And so the word good, I think, really became a huge part of our purpose in that season. Right. And even now, good is like a word that I feel like has been assigned to us. And so people could look at it and say, oh, a real good life, the name of our book. There was so much purpose in that name, and there was so much purpose in the name of the good life, because it seems like something that's really simple, but it is in essence, but it's something that's also easy to miss. That good is easy to pass by and not to see. And so I'm proud of you for listening to that call in your heart that said, no, I got to wait for the right thing, the right time. And when you and I have come together, it's always been better.
And I appreciated, honestly, the detour we were taking, where it wasn't like the book was just not an option for me, but I was no longer stressing out about it. I just knew that, like, God, I'm going to kind of release this. And if it is meant to be, it's going to circle and it's going to make its way back. Yep. That's how I've known if anything in my life is actually going to happen. And if something is meant to be, God will always find a way in the right season to keep bringing it back in front of your eyes. And as we were now on this detour path with our podcast, and we are literally living and breathing in this new journey as podcasters, I was genuinely enjoying just being able to go to a studio or even recording at home during the pandemic. Like, I was enjoying the journey and the conversations we were now having for 3+ years about what the good life means to so many different people from so many different walks of life. It felt like our podcast became this learning journey where God was going to take us on a journey and actually uncover these nuggets and also help shape our perspective on what a good life truthfully means.
Right.
And we had so many fun, eclectic, unique, powerful guests. Just talk about a variety of guests. We didn't have a specific niche on our podcast. Yeah. And I think that really, I don't know, it kind of took it to that level where the more we were talking about the good life, the more our message really started to come to life
Right.
about what the good life really means and how to actually cultivate it. And so, like I said, that book, it didn't just like disappear from 2018 until
Right.
when we started to pick back up the pen. It would slowly but surely, like a friend, it would pop into my life. And if I think about a friend just kind of visiting your home, that friend just kind of like comes by, checks on you, sees how you're doing. That's kind of how I started to feel with the process of the book. It was no longer a stressful thing, but God was reminding me that like it is still a low-hanging fruit and it's not going to be cut from the tree.
Right.
And it's because God really was holding on to it, because he was going to be really ultimately, I feel, the author of this book.
Yeah.
And we were going to take a lot of his words and his teachings and the experiences that he's given us to be able to write a book that to me feels like it is bridging the gap between a world that, yes, is of God and is God-filled Christian believers, but also a
This
bridge
applies to
between
everybody.
that applies to anyone and
Yeah.
everyone who wants truthfully to see the good in their life.
And I think it's cool how the timing worked out, right? I mean, 5 years, but it's like this time, 2023, it's really a time where people are, especially after everything we went through in the last few years with the pandemic, it's really a time where people are searching for more meaning. They're searching for more good. They're searching for more substance in their life. It's like they want to be connected to their life. There's so much distraction, as we've seen over the years. We've been accustomed. We live in the age of distraction.
Yeah.
We live in an age where, it's easy to get lost in your phone for 2 hours. Your time is your life, and time is precious.
Right.
And so your life is precious, but it has to be treated as such. And you can't miss the simple moments and the small things. And so as we were talking to people about the good life, and we were in that booming podcast era too, where everyone's starting a podcast. There's so many podcasts talking about how to be successful. In one way or the other, that's their focus. And we had plenty of shows where we talked about success, but real success looks different than what we're being sold. It looks different than the good life we're being told is the good life. It's
Right.
holistic. It's not one specific area. Because if you focus all your life on being successful, okay, maybe you make $200 million, but did you pay attention to your kids?
Right.
Did you pay attention to your marriage? Did you pay attention to your health? All these things can begin to fall off the wagon. And man, I can say that I wouldn't trade $200 million for my kids despising me when they're older, because I say, Dad, you never spent any time with us.
Right.
So the good life is holistic. It's not just focusing on one area or the other. It's tending to the garden that you have that's right out in your backyard and saying, how can I make this garden the best I can make it? How can I tend to every area of this? And there's a lot of things to tend to.
Right. I remember this book, Journey, 2020 January. This is when we were kind of back on the track again. We were like, all right, I really do feel like we have this strong message now. We've been doing our podcast. We were finally getting situated in our home in Austin. January 2020 is when we finally, sharpened up our proposal. If you know, in the book world, you do a book proposal first before you just write the pages of your book. That is the journey that we decided to take,
Right.
was to really get a proposal sort of as a roadmap for where we felt like this book was going to go, where it was going to lead people. It was very intentional, meaning we wanted there to be a focal point, but also for the reader, you guys, we wanted to make sure that this book was like a legitimate book where you're going to go through the book and really experience through the way a book is written, how to actually transform and to change your life. So we knew that what we needed to do is have a very clear and a very concise why. We needed to know exactly what stories we were going to pull for this book, because we have a treasure chest of stories. And we also knew that the stories that were going to be in this book were going to be different stories than that nobody's ever really heard, because the stories that you can write in a book are so intimate. You can't always share that on Instagram or even a podcast episode.
Right.
You can't unpack it. There's something about sitting with a reader when they are holding a book. It is like they are getting to uncover the most intimate parts of your life.
Yeah.
And that is that is where the book platform, I guess if a book is a platform, to me, that is the one place where you can share your stories.
Right.
So I remember when we were writing up the proposal, that process even, which took that even took forever because, again, it's like an artist that's writing, I think, and working on an album. You're constantly revisiting, you're constantly reshaping, and you're reproducing things and moving things around. And I remember in the book proposal, we had our message. We had a very clear message on what the good life was going to be and mean in this book. But I specifically remember that when we finally put the bow on it and we were ready to go take it to, back into the publishing arena to present it to various publishers now at the second time around, I remember we were in Nashville with our literary agent who God brought into this path way after, like 2019. That's a whole nother podcast, but he was such a godsend that came along in the journey when I was praying for that. We were praying for that support. Yeah. And I remember we were in Nashville, COVID times, right? It was like January 2020. We had our book proposal and we were meeting with like 4 or 5 of the biggest publishing companies in the book world, literally. Yeah. I remember that morning feeling ready, but feeling so anxious and so just, I can't describe it. And I was also under the weather. I was kind of freaking out like, oh my gosh, do I have COVID? I hope not. But I felt like the enemy was really trying to get us from like, enjoying that moment. Like we got to this point, Stevie, here's our book proposal. We're ready to show it to the world. We're in the publishing world. I was like, oh my gosh, we have to sell this thing. Like we've worked so hard on just the proposal itself. We got to get people to understand, like, I hope they see the vision. I hope they like us. And do you remember that morning when we walked into that meeting? We got to meet with several publishing companies that have worked on so many cool books that I was like, oh my gosh, I feel like we're such small fish here. And I remember the process of that day and how it rolled out was it didn't even feel like we were selling ourselves. It didn't feel like we needed to sell ourselves. It had felt like one of those things in life where God literally had walked before you to set everything up so that all you have to do is show up and be yourself and know that everything else has been lined up. And that right there for me, January 2020, is I think when it actually hit me that we're doing this. This is happening. And this is after we had already said it's happening and we're doing it. Yeah. But there was something about that out of this world encounter that we were having with these publishers that felt like we actually weren't even needing to sell ourselves.
Right.
Each and every single one of these publishers, it was a God thing that they all walked into those rooms and they all had seen our proposals and they all wanted a chance to work with us to bring the message of this book to life, which made me feel, one, this is a relevant message that people feel and that they're resonating with. But 2, it felt like God said, I have already walked before you and I brought each of these people here today to where all you guys have to do is pick your perfect match, your partner.
Yeah.
And I don't know if you remember this, but the publishing company that we ended up going with obviously was HarperCollins, right? But it was a different department than what I had originally was going to work with. So the Thomas Nelson department of HarperCollins came into the room. They're one of the first publishing companies we met with. And I remember the proposal that we had at the time. The message was there about the good life and what we wanted people to understand about what a real good life is and all the practical tips and tricks. But the style of this book originally was going to be so different. Because I was an influencer or a content creator, I immediately put myself in this box alongside you, and we thought, oh, this book has to be somewhat of a coffee table style book because, we're content creators and we're visual people and this and that. And I remember the publisher said to us.
He was the first guy. He said, I think you guys can totally write a trade book, which is a book, that doesn't have pictures or anything.
He was
like, you guys can do this. You have more than enough stories, wisdom to share. I notice those are all the things that people ask for in your podcast.
And I don't know why that struck me like lightning, but he confidently was able to tell us, like,
he charged us.
He basically said,
challenged us.
You guys actually have stories.
Yeah.
You have not just little surface level stories. He goes, you guys have some deep, impactful, like relatable, but also heartfelt stories. And he was amazed, I think, because, us in our early 30s, there's so much life that, yes, we had lived up until that point, but we saw it as, what? We have so much more to learn. What do you mean we have all these stories? It really gave us, I don't know why, but that, I think right then and there we said, scratch that concept now.
Well, he said he really called us up. It was like a moment where somebody calls you up. They see greatness in you.
Confirmation.
They see greatness in you and they call you up. and they're like, you can do this. And it was just a light bulb moment of like a publisher at a major publishing house just told us he wants us to write this book. And I feel like that was God's leadership too. Just saying like, no, you can do this. And we believed it after that. We were like, yeah, we can do this. We have to do this.
Right.
We have to share these stories. We have to talk about what a real good life is. And the
use
meaning,
our stories to be able to do that. Yeah.
and the meaning behind the name of the book is something that everything that we've done in this book, we've put a ton of thought into, you know, we've been very, very patient, and we, you know, you always feel like you're like, I want to make the perfect decision, you know, whether it was the picture or the font or the way, you know, everything. We're like, you know, there's so many choices, and Sazan and I, like you and I struggle sometimes, I think, to make those hard decisions because we appreciate some different styles and things like that. But the point is that the name of the book too, you know, A Real Good Life. It felt like a play on words a little bit, like a real good life.
I want a real
good life. And then also a real good life. And so there's intentionality behind that, because it's answering that question, like, what does a real good life look like? You know, what is the one that's like not necessarily the movie version? Maybe it could be if you made it a little happier and fluffier, like, but also there's a happy ending to this story. Like, what does a real good life look
is
like?
Raw. It's gritty. It's unfiltered. It's imperfect, but it's also in its own way really beautiful and authentic. And that's why we even felt like that word was so powerful, because while our podcast has been called The Good Life with Stevie and Sazan for 3+ years, something about the book feels like we're going even deeper than we ever have on any other platform, which it feels intimidating. It feels scary. We're human here, and we're nervous because a lot of these stories they're our own. These are stories that we feel are sacred. And sometimes in life, when you open your heart and you share those stories with others, strangers even, you know, not everybody can appreciate your story or be kind when they hear things about your life and your story. And there's the judgment, there's that part of it. But I knew that God has given us a life where we've always prayed, Lord, give us a story. Whatever obstacle we're going through, God, use this for your good and give us a story that we can share with others so that it can be a testament to your greatness and your promises. And we knew that, okay, God, if we're going to write this book, we don't really want it to be about us, even though, yes, our faces are on the cover, marketing reasons. You really should have your face on the cover if you're writing a book. You know what I mean?
Right.
But
we didn't want it to feel like another, like, hey.
It's not another, hey, look at me and look at Stevie and our beautiful, perfect life here in Austin. And
it ain't.
And that's where the real is going to come through in this book. So going back to that original proposal, how we were going to do kind of like little recipes and little cookbook stuff and like DIY.
God was like, that ain't it.
Listen, I will say though, I still have a dream in me tucked away that I would love to do a book like that one day, because of a good life, you can talk about it, but I also want to be able to show that one day and through the different, beautiful, creative, inspirational things. But I knew that this book needed to definitely come out first. Yes. I'm not even thinking about a second book, to be honest with you right now. This has taken I'm just happy that we're here with this book. But I will say that this book is literally like a diary. It feels like an intimate diary where not only are you getting to know us, but forget us. There's like so many profound messages and revelations and things that God showed us and told us. And so many times I wanted to go on Instagram and be like, dang, you guys will not believe what we just uncovered about the real good life. But I couldn't go online and share it. We had to save all of these things for the book. Yep. And I'm so glad we did, because now that the book is here and we're able to read it all the way through, I cried every time I got to the end of that book, because I just realized, like, man, some of these words and some of these things I'm reading, how did we come up with that? And I knew it wasn't us. It was literally like we were being filled by the Holy Spirit, helping us, guide us, and write this book for the times we're in now.
I feel like this book really is a service. It's coming from that heart. It's not like you might see us on the cover and we're smiling, we're having a nice time. It's not like, and then everything was perfect and we had the best life. No, it's not like that. Sorry. I don't know what that. Somebody I know used to talk like that. We have the best life. No, really. I mean, this is a book. Ooh, God bless her.
Peed a little.
God help you.
Okay.
This book is not, it's not the peachy life. It's more of a good fight. And these are the stories that we've had to fight for. But this book really serves, I want it to serve as a calling out to the people who are reading it. Just like that publisher called us out and said, you can do this. I see this in you. We're calling out others and saying, like, there is a good life for you. And there's a life that God intended for you to live, and you can live it. It's right next to you. It's right within your grasp. Just like John said in the Bible, the kingdom of heaven is at hand. Well, the good life is at hand. It's right here. You can reach out and you can grab it. And some of us have more resources in other areas than others. Some of us, we don't struggle with health. We have more resources as far as being healthier. Or some of us have more resources in terms of finances or time. Like, we all have different gifts, but we are given what we need by God to live a good life and make the most of our days and make them purpose-filled. And so we really believe, babe, like, that this book is a roadmap to living a real good life, not the peachy life, but a life that's good and worth fighting for, because everything that we have that's good in this life is worth fighting for. And it's something that you do fight for. Yeah. And so I thank God that he chose us to write this book, because I want to see people send us messages and say, like, when I read this book, I realized that I wasn't living the life that God had intended for me. And since then, I found purpose. I found connection to my life, and I'm cherishing every single day. Even though the days aren't easy, I cherish them.
Yeah. I remember when we were writing this book, even your stories that came through, because it's a co-authored book. So writing the book together is interesting, because you're going to see certain chapters from my voice, and then you're going to see certain chapters and perspectives and point of views from your voice, which I think is really cool that we have that both voices come through, similar to our podcast. But I love how, you've gone through certain seasons of your life where you've struggled with different things than I have. You've struggled with different types of depression and anxiety. And for anybody who might be in that season and you pick up this book, we believe that if you're in that type of a season of life, we hope and pray that you would find not only the encouragement through hearing some of the most intimate, raw stories from Stevie's perspective, but that you would also know that there are practical and there are resourceful ways to actually get yourself out of those ruts and out of those seasons. Or maybe it's being okay in those seasons when you're sitting still and you're waiting. And I even know that from the perspective of time, as we've been talking about, that really became the foundation for this book. We realized that if we were going to break up this book into 4 sections, we thought, how cool would it be to take the sections of the day, because we believe how you live your day is an extension of how you will live your life. Yep. So instead of doing we could have written so many, I feel like a huge novel on what is the good life. But instead, we decided to hone in and say, let's take this one day at a time. So we took the 4 sections of our day, right? You've got the morning, you've got your midday, you've got the afternoon, and then you got your evening, nighttime hours, right? So we thought, okay, let's break up the day. You get 24 hours in a day. Why not look at the clock and see the beauty in those sections of the day? And so if you're somebody who struggles with waking up in the morning and finding the motivation to actually get up and connect with your life, we have an amazing section for you, and it's a section that I genuinely feel is very important when you're starting your good life in your day. Right. And so we have really spent the time on these different parts of our day. And I think through the journey, I've learned where I tend to thrive the most. Because, there's nobody on this planet is just loving every single moment of every single day. Let's be real about that. Yeah. I think while we were writing this book, I realized when I would actually feel the most inspired to write and to think and to work and to process, I'm more of a nighttime owl person, whereas you would love to get up early. And I remember you'd go to the coffee shop and you would just start writing away. And I mean, it was really cool for us to even see where our strengths lie, and then where the areas of our day where we had to give ourselves grace, but then also some practical ways to keep going and to keep moving. Yeah. And so I really love that this book is phased out in those 4 sections, which we're going to talk about. I want to ask you, babe, without giving away too much, we've got, oh my gosh, so many stories in this book. In fact, we had to narrow it down and actually nix a few. But if you had to share with people what I don't know, maybe it's a personal chapter or it's a personal thing that you're sharing in this book, a story that you get to put in the pages of this book that you incorporated. What would you say is something really special that you're excited to share with this community of readers that they probably maybe have or maybe haven't heard from you before, but maybe not in this way. What would you say is like a chapter or a story that you're looking forward to?
Good question. There's so many stories, you know, it's you feel like you're sharing a huge part of yourself, but I think there was one story in particular, where I was on a trip with my dad. Something I felt like in life, it was like a small miracle, and you would, I guess, from the outside looking in, just think like, oh, that's not really a big deal, but it was a really big deal to me. It was a moment in which, um, it was one of the moments I felt the most present that I've ever felt in my life. You know, I was in a room full of strangers in Norway, and I don't know what came over me, this courage to play the piano and play a song that I had written. And what happened there that night at this small little place, literally on the tip of the Lofton Islands, you know, with 12 people there, 12 people there. What happened that night, it was magical. And I left feeling good. I left feeling purpose, and I left feeling, I don't know. I left feeling discovery.
I think about life,
it was something about, it was really about, I don't want to give away too much, but it was really about feeling connected to your life, but also the value of your gifts and talents and letting your light shine, and how we forget that too. You know, it's easy to hide away your light, hide away the gifts that God has given you, because you forget the value that they have, or maybe you've never been told that they have value.
But there's not a million people in the room that are, you know, cheering you on or applauding.
Right. And it's not about like putting yourself on a stage and being like, look at me. But it's about, God has given you a light, and your light looks different than other people's, but he's given you a specific light, and it's time to let that light shine. It's time to find out what that light looks like, you know? And it's not about you. It's about serving others. It's about what God has put you on this earth to do, which is to serve others. And so I really believe that there's a light that we all have within us that God wants to see shine, because it's like when you look at your kids, you love seeing them be themselves. Maybe some kids are goofy or smart or whatever. You love to see their gifts come out and go like, that's what makes them unique. And so I think that there's a lot of people that we're going to read this book, and they're going to realize, maybe I've been hiding my light, and I want to start letting my light shine. You know, I want to use the gifts that God's given me and not hide them away in a closet so no one ever sees them.
It's beautiful.
What about you?
I really feel like this book, it goes through the evolution of our life from, you know, when we first met in college, kind of digging up some of those stories in the archives of our life. Yeah, when you're writing these chapters about, and you know, these chapters have specific amount of words, and so you really can take your time being colorful with your word choice and just slowing down versus like Instagram, you only have 140 word count to be able to like say what you're going to say. So it's super highly edited in a sense, you know? But in this book, I did feel like we have the permission to actually go back, dig up some of our stories when we first met, the journey of what it took to actually get to the altar. A lot of that stuff that I haven't shared before, I feel like I've had the opportunity in this safe space of a way through the book to be able to actually go back on and reflect. And these are stories too that are funny. I'm like, oh my gosh, I'm just happy that if nobody ends up buying this book, if nobody ends up reading this book, at least we have a book that we can pass down to our children and their children, and it can become a keepsake one day of our stories. One specific story, though, that really I am very excited to share with the world is there's a chapter in this book where I really get to pull the curtain back on who I am as a Kurd, the Kurdish people, talking about, you know, this is a specific chapter where it's about focusing your eyes to see, right? When we're talking about good. So it's like focus your eyes on to see. So I specifically, when it came to what story I wanted to use to be able to tie this chapter, bring this chapter home and this visual, I knew that I wanted to share the story about my people, who we are as Kurds. Getting into like the historical part is cool because it's not like this book is not filled with like historical stuff like that, but to be able to like have a chapter where I get to share who I am, who my people are, talk about Kurdistan, and specifically through the eyes of my grandfather, my Bauka, who, he passed away in the process of us writing this book right before I had Amari. So for me to be able to dedicate this chapter to him, because he truthfully has inspired my life in so many ways. Him as an artist, literally a painter and an advocate for his family, for the Kurdish cause, and just the human he was. I mean, he really had the eyes to see the good, despite the hard that him and his family were going through to come to this country. And some of that part of the story that I share, it's very deep and it's very real and it's very raw. And it is emotional having to write, when I was writing that, to put that pen to paper and to share that side of my family and the story. And it made me honestly see in a new perspective, in a new way, just like the beauty of stories and how the people in our lives and the people we surround ourselves with, they are our greatest storytellers. They teach us so much about life. Yeah. And I can't wait for people to read this story about my Bauka, because he named me and there's a meaning behind that name. And I think it all ties into this beautiful chapter about focusing on seeing the good. So I'm really excited about that chapter amongst so many other chapters, including in the intro when I first fell in love with you and you were wearing the wrong shade of foundation. That's all I'm going to say.
I like seeing that. I like seeing that story in book form. It's totally different than any other form.
Everyone's like, wait, Stevie was wearing foundation when you met him?
You're not giving any context, but I guess you have to read the book to find out.
What is your I remember when we were writing this book, when we were actually getting into it, the question that kept coming up is, what do you ultimately want the takeaway to be for this book? And we have so many, honestly, authors on our podcast over the years that's a question that we've asked. But when you turn it around and it's back on you.
There's so many books that have blessed my life. I mentioned earlier, 40 Days to a Joy-Filled Life. I want that effect for people. Mm-hmm. I want them to read this book and be like, you know what, that really changed my perspective on life. I felt like I was in a rut. Maybe you felt stuck. Maybe you felt like something was missing. Like, I don't know, there's this disconnection or this discontentment within me, and I can't really put my finger on what it is, but it's
a hunger to live.
Yeah, it's like, it's not only a hunger to live, but to know yourself, to know your why, your purpose, and ultimately be connected to God and feel like he's leading your steps, because that's a really good feeling. It's not a good feeling to feel like, I jumped this ship called life and I'm aboard. I'm not the captain of this ship. I don't know who the captain is, or maybe you are the captain of the ship and you're like, I have no map. I don't know where I'm going, or I thought I had the map, but all of a sudden, like, things have come, storms have come, and I'm off trail. I want to get back onto the right path. I really hope that people can read this book and feel like after reading this book, they realize, first of all, even if you've made mistakes and you feel like you're off track, it's okay. Mm. Second of all, there is a plan to get you back on track, and it's not too late. Mm. And third of all, that you can have a life of great purpose, great meaning, and great intention, to where you get to the end of your days and you say, I lived a good life. I think that's like such a cry in my heart, is I want to get to the end of my days and say, I lived a good life. Mm-hmm. I loved people. I loved God. I did my best. Mm-hmm. And I really lived a full life. I struggled. I was blessed. I was loved, I kind of saw and did it all, Yeah. I think that's a real good life. And I want people to have that when they read this book. If they're looking for that, I want them to have that.
That's good.
What about you?
For me, I think I would say in 2019, when we were picking up the pen again, and we felt like, okay, I think this book is definitely something that I want to revisit. I remember when I was going to the gym, we were in LA. We had left LA, but we were visiting LA at this time. Mm-hmm. And I was coming back to our little Airbnb. And I remember when I was driving down Victory Boulevard, when God, bam, flashed the book in my sight, in my vision. I saw the cover of this book, and it was a home. It was just a house. It was a house on the cover of this book. And at the time, I was thinking, like, what? What does this mean? And I remember specifically seeing the words, a home in your heart. And I remember for a long time, I thought that was going to be the title of the book. I was like, this book has to be called A Home in Your Heart, because that's the vision I had. But I think ultimately what God was showing me on the outside of the book, on that cover, was what the inside was going to be filled with, what it was going to be for those who pick this book up and open the pages and they just submerge themselves into the words. Is God showed me the visual that the words would be for people. And my prayer and my hope and my why for this book is that it would, every time somebody picks up this book, whether it's on an airplane, whether it's in your bed at night or in the bathroom, wherever, hey, I don't judge. I would just hope that people feel like they're coming away to that secret place, but it feels like it's a home in their heart that they can come to when they need a place of rest, when they need a reminder that your life is good. Despite not being where you want to be, you got a good life. I want to remind people and encourage them that God is with them and he is never going to forsake them and abandon them. And I want to encourage people through our hard stories and the challenges that we continue to face, that life doesn't have to be perfect. It's not about perfection. It is about direction. And I hope that this book will just direct people to that place that feels like home. Because when you feel at home, you're at peace. And I feel like ultimately all things in life, if you can navigate life through that place of peace and rest, that's truthfully where beautiful things start to happen. You start to see amazing things in your life. And so I hope that this book is a home for your heart. That is what I truthfully hope and pray would come out of this book. And I'm just so excited about it because it has been a long time in the making. But I would say I wouldn't trade that timeline for the world because the time is now. And I don't want to sugarcoat that we're living in a world today that it makes me sad that more and more people are so disconnected, us included. There's so many times I'll catch myself distracted, infinitely scrolling on the platforms or missing out on like what my kid just did. And I think what I really am starting to cultivate and understand more is that we've got to be present where our feet are. If you go to other countries, which we've had the pleasure while we were writing this book to visit so many beautiful lands and places different than here, so many people are living present lives. It exists. But here at home, what we've noticed here in the United States specifically, it is really sad how everyone's just so distracted in their own little bubbles. And I want to be able to hopefully be, I don't know, I want to create the world that we want to see more of. And it's hopefully through the pages of this book, we're going to give people the permission to enjoy the art of slow living, to take your time. Yeah. Jesus never ran in the Bible. You didn't hear him saying he ran to the mountaintop in his Jesus sandals. He walked at a 3-mile-per-hour pace. Why? So that he would be available to those who would see him, strangers would encounter him, but to also be present and to see the goodness that was all around him. Yeah. And I just want to cultivate that for my kids now more than ever, for my family, my life. And I truthfully feel like, if anything, this book has just given us a newfound purpose to not only, show people what the good life looks like through our content and our channels, but now we get to tell them through the lessons and the experiences that we've had over the course of our life so far. So I'm really excited for this book to bless you guys. And we're sharing it with any of you listening here today because this is an exclusive podcast recording for those of you who have been here with us, right? Yeah. Like, that this was probably coming sooner than later, but we couldn't have done it alone. So shout out to just an incredible team at Thomas Nelson, at the HarperCollins crew. Yeah. Talk about a team of God-filled people that truthfully believe in you. It's not just some big beast of a machine of a publisher just trying to get a book out and slap your name on it. No, everybody has taken so much time. So many hands have been laid on this project that I believe God is going to do something incredible through this book and in your lives. And I can't wait to see it. It's kind of like now we sit back and we get to see what God's going to do.
Can't wait.
And I'm so excited.
I'm very proud of us. I'm proud of this book, and I can't wait to share it with everybody.
There's nobody else I would have written this book with, babe. I hope you know that. I've said this to you.
Let's pound it with our feet so we don't have to reach across.
I've said this to you since day one. I've said, we're better together.
That's right.
We are better together. There's nobody else I could have done this
Oof.
with. How many nights were we editing chapters, laying in our bed?
Right. I always thought
kids that were driving us nuts earlier in the day. It was like a real life.
You're a good writer. Writing has always been on paper. It's never been my strong suit. And so to challenge myself in that way and to pull these stories out, like, I'm very excited. I'm very happy. I'm thankful for this opportunity.
I'm also thankful for we had an editor help us.
Yep.
Help us make sure that the stories were actually translating into the book form sense.
Talk about
that. Different.
Talk about, like, there's nothing wrong with getting some help. We needed all the help, but it's like, darn it, we're going to do this thing. And we did it, and it's done. We're proud of it.
I'm so proud
of you. And I just pray that you guys buy this book, share it with anybody who needs to hear this.
It's available everywhere.
Really for anybody and everybody. So yeah.
Excited.
I love you, babe. Congratulations. We have a book.
We birthed a book. Oh my gosh.